Hello, my lovelies. Family, today we're going to talk about natural law, kind of just more in a general form. The reason you need to understand it is because natural law is exactly the foundational principles that lead us to common law, that then lead us to contract, and then lead us into uh, maritime and all the good stuff you've learned. So, I saw a comment on Facebook where, this happens often where someone will insert and impose their ideas in a way that is, conclusionary. And the reason I'm addressing that is because if you're going through people's comments and somebody sounds like they know so much stuff and it just sounds so good, the first thing they're going to say is, oh, well, you need to do this, or you need to do that, or you need to refrain from this, or you need to refrain from that. Sounds good. It sounds good. But in this particular instance, there was a video that was out talking about how one gets jurisdiction. And the video was actually really, really good from a guy back in 2015. And of course, people got to come out and say, no, this is totally, wrong. And he doesn't, just because he's reading something doesn't make it true. And well, sure, that could be your opinion. I mean, I'm not against someone having an opinion or, taking a position in which they disagree, but they come up with conclusions and then try to impose that thought, that conclusion upon you. And this is why I'm going to do this video today. So rather than allowing someone's conclusion to bend your will to do what they believe is right or correct, we need to use our own will to decide for ourselves what is correct or incorrect. See, there are teachers and there are preachers. If someone is imposing upon you their idea and their belief with conclusions that they are trying to force you to accept, that would be preaching. When somebody is trying to teach you something, it is just giving you information by which you will have an opportunity to look at this information from your perspective and develop your own conclusions, develop your own ideas about what the information being delivered is. And the reason that's important is because most people really don't discuss natural law enough, in my opinion, because I think that we need to look at it a little closer and understand it in depth. And if we don't, we're going to be lost, because all of what they're doing really does stem from natural law first. Then you have your common law. So we know that the nature of man has certain tendencies to behave badly. So we have to develop a fiduciary model to help them understand that this is the restrictions upon your behavior. And when you are not behaving yourself according to those restrictions, then we can apply some sort of correction, some sort of education to help you get your mind right so that you can act accordingly, since you have to share this space with so many other people. We don't want your bad behavior to negatively affect the population, because if you negatively affect the population, this could cause for disorder. And it is the government's most highest duty of care to keep order or to maintain order, hence the reason we have peacekeepers, right? Everybody's a damn peacekeeper. They're there to maintain the order of the population. If one guy gets out of line and doesn't obey, it will have a trickle-down effect if the other people in that community see that he didn't have to obey. If I see someone telling a cop, hey, you know what, I can travel freely amongst the ways without a driver's license, and then that man is, let go, he's set free, like, you're right, you got me. This would cause for civil unrest, and it would actually breach the peace, and it would cause for that order that they want to keep to be broken. So this is why we need to understand that these are natural law concepts, because if we let one guy get away with that, all the rest of the people are going to want to get away with it too. It's going to cause them to stop getting driver's licenses, and then nobody will follow the rules of the road, and we will have chaos. Because we understand that that is the nature of man's behavioral patterns. If you don't believe that, then you are living on another planet. So I know for a fact, if we were to unleash that a driver's license is not necessary, everybody would, it would be a free-for-all. I think we can all agree on that. I don't think anyone would really disagree with that. So this is why it's important to understand these things. Now, this person that came out imposing his ideals was against the fact that there's a natural law being practiced and that everything is common law and blah, 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 whatever. So hopefully this gives you a little bit more clarity as far as how that works. So it begins with the people, right? I think we can all agree that the power is with the people. From those powers that we have, we also therefore have authority over government. However, we are busy bees. We must raise our children. We must go to work every day. We must pay our bills. We must do all these things to keep up with life. So instead of taking on the entire burden of all that power, we authorize the government to do certain duties. So this is us subrogating our rights to the government so that they can carry out our will. Now, these powers granted to the government by the people means also that you are with limited rights in certain aspects because you gave those rights to someone else, right? So what we have are departments. We have the Department of Health and Human Services. We have the Department of Commerce and the Department of Agriculture. So each of these departments have been authorized to manage the affairs within their respective areas or their field of expertise. So if we're talking about health and human services, then we think about it as being, you know, physical health, mental health, anything to do with health of the body of people. This is not in regards to individual persons, okay? This means that the department's main function is to assure that no individual action or inaction will provide for a domino effect amongst the community. So if you don't get an immunization, if it's against your religion, if it's against your belief, if you just don't want one for whatever reason on this planet, the department will analyze if you do not get this particular immunization and you say contract measles. It may cause for an outbreak amongst the community, so therefore it affects the public health. So your inaction has caused for the public to adversely be affected by your breach of fiduciary duty care, because as a citizen, you are required to also, or you are charged with the duty to also protect the health and well-being of the rest of the population. So when you are operating in your persons amongst all these different community peoples, it is not your intent, will, or desire to hurt anyone. So because of that reason, we have certain rules such as traffic guidance and, you know, don't speed. If you're speeding, someone's going to get hurt, so forth and so on. So your actions directly affect everyone else. And if we don't have these rules, everybody else will be afraid to get on the road, afraid to drive, afraid to go to work, and it will negatively affect the economic system of the community. So to kind of have that idea in your mind, when you think about everything you do every day, I challenge you to really dig deep every move you make and determine for yourself, am I affecting my neighbor in this particular action or inaction, and how would it affect them? And you'll be surprised that many things you do on a daily basis really are somehow, maybe not directly, but indirectly affecting your community. So when we are determining ourselves to be free, the question is that really someone you want to be? Do you want to be free, or are you willing to sacrifice some of your freedoms in order to protect your neighbors from harm? So this is where our government has gotten way, way out of control with way too much regulation. But the general idea of it is to really protect the public from anyone harming it. And that's why we're going to get into this particular enactment. It is directly relative to the social behaviors of populations. It is directly relative to Agenda 2030. If you are not familiar with Agenda 2030, I highly recommend you look at it. It lays out a foundation stipulating how they want people to behave in specific arenas. If you go like to say UNICEF, you'll find how they've laid out the goals and plans to protect women and children from economic harm through what we know as being domestic violence protections. So all of this stems from a treaty. Treaty, as you know, it stems from the law of nations, right? And that, my friends, is natural law. So what we have here are all these separate departments who contain experts in their field. Those experts are who we granted authority to in order to help us manage that particular field of business we otherwise would have managed on our own, but we're too busy. So this is where the power of the people comes from, where we use our common law rights to contract. Okay, there's your common law. So now I am going to say register to vote for my representative because by contract, using my common law right, I have determined I don't have time to handle the legalities of things. Therefore, I want someone else to legislate for me. And now I have conveyed my right to self-govern to the legal department, AKA senators, congressmen, representatives, so that they can handle it. But that's a big job for them as well. So what they do is they delegate a portion of the authority I gave them to what are called committees. These committees have a panel of experts in that field. So if we're talking about health and human resources or health and human services, then we're going to be looking at anything to do with health, period, whether it's behavioral, physical, or public. So these committees will have doctors, they will have psychiatrists, social workers, people who have studied the psychology of man in order to understand better what the people desire, what the people are actually cultured to do, and how we can change that culture in order to make them behave in a way that is so civilized that we would never possibly get in each other's way, never possibly annoy each other. And this is a very, very detailed and big process. It takes years for them to conduct these research projects to determine first what the community believes, and then second, they have to start pumping out advertisements, which is what really the Department of Health and Human Service, if you think of them as being a marketing firm. So you might see on the news at some point a bunch of messages coming out. So you'll hear newscasters saying something like, spanking children has been found by psychiatrists at, blah, blah university to be some sort of harm to their psychological well-being. And when they grow up with these bad feelings, they're going to end up not being able to work properly and participate in the community, right? So that's the idea of it. So they put these advertisements out there, these marketing schemes. And so now the culture who believed that spanking was a natural thing, was necessary to raise children, they now start to say, oh, wow, the psychiatrist, the expert our representatives chose to review this information, the expert has determined that this actually hurts my kid psychologically. Wow, I didn't know that. Now that I've been educated on that, I don't want to hurt my child, so I'm going to stop spanking, or I'm going to therefore teach my children not to spank their children. And now we have a change or a different culture or different cultural belief. Once we've gotten the entire community to understand that it causes psychological harm, we can then now, these committees can then create more legislation by adding or amending a statute about child abuse to include spanking, because we have the consent of the governed and we have a majority belief that spanking is bad. So now when you go to court, you are in breach of that fiduciary duty of care because you spanked your child, and therefore being negligent in that duty of care, we can now say that the child is dependent, and that child being dependent means that he does not have someone to represent him in that fiduciary duty model, such as a parent. So through the doctrine of locus parentis, your agents will step up and take mommy and daddy's place as parent, and they will now manage the care of the child. So to understand these things in the most deepest way is why I'm going to keep repeating it until people get it. This is a natural law because we are studying the behavior of the people in their respective fiduciary duties amongst all the different things we do in life. So let's go through this enactment in hopes that it will kind of clarify and give you understanding. So what this enactment was for really is the United States has appropriated funds and banked them or put funds in trust to do these, to carry out these very projects, researches, and to help increase the economic status of all the people of the nation. Now, this is not limited to the United States. This is worldwide, which is why they work with the UN. So the UN is basically managing the trust funds that all the nations partake in or participate in, so that where there is need within a particular country, they can set up a similar structure utilizing the information or the research gathered from all the other nations to help that particular community develop, right? So we also have that here. This is why these are international agreements. You also need to understand that your states are several and separate from the United States. Each state is its own country. It has its own constitution and its own autonomy from the United States. The United States is simply just a union. That's all it is. It is a union by which all of the different states will come together to make contracts, arrangements, agreements, cooperative agreements in particular, to make sure that when all of their peoples are traveling amongst the states, they remain within the same sort of construct, so that if I'm from like Illinois and I go to Indiana, Indiana can determine I know how to behave because Illinois taught me. That's all it's for. It's not really a big deal, right? So the United States is, in the best way for me to explain it would be like it's one big Red Cross. So these people that sit in the Congress seats develop these plans to assist in development of rural and poor communities. It's all about helping the poor. It's all about helping the children. It's such an ugly facade. So when they do these things, what they're really saying is that if you have yourself a stable income, a stable job, it is also your responsibility to put into the pot to make sure that the people in the rural communities or in other countries that are developing have an opportunity to be equal to you. So that's where your equality comes from. So now we have this pot of money that we're going to disperse amongst poor communities off the backs of your labor. That's how it works. It's not rocket science. So anyways, agricultural research carried out under this act shall take account of the special needs of small farmers in the determination of research priorities, include research on interrelationships among technology. This is the data collections that I so love to talk about. Institutions, those institutions deliver all the different types of education that the community needs in order to develop economically. And economic, social, environmental, and cultural factors affecting small farm agriculture, and make extensive use of field testing and adapt basic research to local conditions. Special emphasis shall be placed on disseminating research results to the farms on which they can be put to use, and especially on institutional and other arrangements needed to assure that small farmers have effective access to both new and existing improved technology. And the only reason I'm reading that part about agriculture, I could get into it deeply, but I just wanted you to see that they use research on interrelationships, okay, with people who are experts in technology, economy, social health and well-being, environment. So all those people come together, the experts that we hired, that we authorized to help us determine how to better the farmers' lives, okay? Now, when we're talking about health, this is where I really wanted this to go. And I'm not going to take too long. I'm just going to briefly show you this because I found it interesting, and I'm hoping your wheels will start turning on this. So this is the section that talks about population and health. Findings. The Congress recognizes that poor health conditions and uncontrolled population growth can vitiate otherwise successful development efforts. So what he's saying here is when you are poor, you're hurting the economy. Large families in developing countries are the result of complex social and economic factors which change relatively slowly among the poor majority, least affected by economic progress, as well as the result of lack of effective birth control. Therefore, effective family planning depends upon economic and social change, as well as the delivery of services, and is often a matter of political and religious sensitivity. While every country has the right to determine its own policies with respect to population and growth, voluntary population planning programs can make a substantial contribution to economic development, higher living standards, and improve health and nutrition. Good health conditions are a principal element in improved quality of life and contribute to the individual's capacity to participate in the development process, while poor health and debilitating disease can limit productivity. Okay, what are we talking about there? Use your brains, friends. We're talking about the Department of Family Planning Services and this creation from here. Okay, so family planning was developed, your abortion, your birth control, it was developed in order to reduce population, in order to increase economic development of the population, okay? Let's talk about that for a moment, because here's how this works. As they said here earlier, it has sensitivity involving religious and political problems, right? So look back in the day, for those of you who are old enough to remember, there was a prohibition from a religious perspective, if you were Catholic or Christian, right? There was controversy in relation to birth control. Birth control, it was considered to be an impairment of God's authority because we are not in charge of procreation. We're not in charge or in power over our own creations, right? Every baby who is conceived is because that's what God wanted. So we were not able to use birth control up until I think somewhere in the 40s or something, if I remember correctly, but don't mark me on that. But so we weren't able to use birth control at one point if you had Christian beliefs or Catholic beliefs. So one day the Pope gets up and says, I changed my mind. We're not going to follow the Bible. We're not going to follow scripture. We're going to say that the Catholic Church now accepts the fact that birth control is necessary and that it is now going to be acceptable amongst the Catholics and the Christians. Quite a big decision he made there, friends, is it not? Because prior to him making that decision, we didn't have family planning services. But all of a sudden, he waves his magic wand and boom, we can now legislate in favor of birth control. My guess, and this is just my guess, my opinion, is that this is where this stems from. So you hear your presidents all the time, we are a Christian nation. You go to your hospital, they say, what denomination are you? We have every kind that you need. And most of the time you are compelled to say, I am a Christian. So we now know that the general population is Christian, and therefore when the Pope says birth control is okay, we presume therefore all the people believe birth control is okay. But why did he make that decision all of a sudden? Lifetime after lifetime, no birth control. That's interfering with God's divine process. But all of a sudden, it looks like the government has an interest to control the population growth. And this enactment was done in the 50s, by the way. So all of a sudden, the government finds that there is an economic reason to provide family planning services with birth control that would normally have been against the community's beliefs. But over time, since the 50s, we certainly have changed our beliefs. I don't think many people even really think too deeply about birth control because most of us are not really following scripture and most of us aren't involved. Or for those who are involved and reading scripture, they're being preached to about how birth control is acceptable because the Pope said. Because the Pope said, here we have now legislation to help us decrease population growth because the state has an interest in controlling the economic development of the environment because it's lucrative. I wonder if he got any extra silk robes or gold nuggets for that. Makes you wonder, but who knows? When there's, can't say that for sure. But I wanted this to show you this very thing because I wanted you to understand that the population control issue that you love and hear about so much is actually inside of our own congressional legislation. This tells you right here, they want to control the population. And they were willing to change religious beliefs and sensitivities in order to get it. So please look a little bit deeper into how natural law works, why it is applicable in your circumstances, and just read it. Just, go, these are not complex things. It's not like, trying to learn every principle of law here or trying to understand how the statute reads. This is real simple stuff. So before we listen to people who want to impose their own belief into our minds, use your good sense, your common sense to find out for yourself. And this is how you can start learning more about it. Go and take a look at this particular enactment. It really nicely breaks down how it all works. It's called the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961. There was an enactment previous to this one in the 50s. I'm not going to pull that up for you right now, but this is just to give you an idea of how to better understand how the system works, because it is our duty to learn government. And as I'm learning government, I'm sharing with you so that you can learn too, because the more we know, the better off we'll be. Have a wonderful afternoon, family. If you have anything to say about that, you can go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section below. But if you have not subscribed yet, make sure that you click the subscribe button so that we can keep delivering truth to you and help you to learn government in a more effective manner. And please don't be shy. Hit the bell. If you hit the bell, then you will get messages showing you that a new video comes out in regards to these matters from our organization. And if you have anything to say, again, leave it in the comments. We'll try to address questions when we can. Have a wonderful afternoon.